You ever feel this quiet heaviness following you around, like you're walking through life with a backpack that never comes off, not heavy enough to stop you in your tracks, but always there? It's strange because everything might seem perfectly fine on the surface. Life might look smooth, manageable even, but deep down there's this weight. Not from dramatic events or big failures, but from the sheer act of being a person. We're constantly juggling our roles, keeping up the image, holding a story together. Always planning, always anticipating, always trying to keep the pieces of our identity neatly in place. And what really drains us isn't the doing, it's that subtle panic humming in the background, that quiet, constant buzz of urgency. It's that feeling that time is slipping away, that we're not keeping up, that maybe, just maybe, there's something vital just beyond our reach, and it's fading faster than we can grasp it. But here's the thing, this kind of suffering, it's invisible. It doesn't cry out for help. It doesn't make a scene. It just whispers. It tightening in your chest while you're waiting in line. That pressure behind the wheel, or when you're lying in bed staring at the ceiling. A silent discomfort that never fully leaves. And what fuels this silent tension? It's something sneaky, a quiet myth we all buy into. The idea that more time will somehow make things better. That if we just had a bit longer, a few more years, then everything would settle. We'd finally get it right. We'd finally arrive. But maybe the problem isn't time. Maybe it's not about years or achievements or some missing clarity we're supposed to find. What if this chronic feeling of not enoughness isn't about time at all? What if it's rooted in the way we see ourselves? Because think about it, we've been trained to believe we are this limited self, a specific me inside a body moving through a linear life, one shot to make it all add up. That belief right there is the real weight. It's not life that exhausts us. It's trying to be someone, constantly, trying to get it right to be enough to fit the part. We're taught to trust the mirror, to take this body as the foundation of who we are, as if the reflection is the truth. So we cling to it, we protect it, we pour our energy into preserving it, extending its time, upgrading its performance. Like the goal is to last as long as possible. But here's the wild part, we didn't choose this body, and we won't choose when it leaves. Still, we act like if we can just stretch it out a bit longer, everything will click. Maybe that's a misplaced effort. Maybe trying to extend the body's life is like clutching a paper ticket long after the ride has already begun. Maybe we're so busy proving we're on the ride that we're not even looking out the window. And just to be clear, this isn't about throwing health or responsibility out the window. It's not about being careless. It's about realizing something deeper. What we are isn't something that can be extended because it was never confined. We mistake the vehicle for the traveler. And because of that, we spend years, sometimes decades, reinforcing an identity that was never needed in the first place. Now, of course, identities do serve a purpose. We have names, roles, preferences, routines. They help us function. They give structure, but they're not required for existence. Just like a uniform helps you do a job, it might be essential for the role, but it's not who you are. Mistaking the uniform for the person wearing it would be absurd, right? And yet we do it all the time. So when the thought shows up, but I need an identity to, there's something simple you can try, not as a trick, not as homework, but just a gentle shift. Once a day, even for just a few seconds, let awareness drift from who you think you are to the fact that you are, not your story, not your plans, not your self-image, just the raw presence before all the labels. Not with strain or force, just a relaxed noticing. In that tiny space, we're not rejecting our personality. We're just not mistaking it for the whole picture. We can still show up, still play the part. But now, we know we're the actor, not the costume. And weirdly, that alone softens things. It brings a kind of peace, a natural lightness without effort. The story doesn't need to end. But the pressure to become can start to dissolve. Not because you figured something out, not because you found some secret technique, but because you stopped confusing the role with the real. That confusion, that mix-up, is what fuels the anxiety. Because when we believe we're just the body, we inherit all of its limits. Fear of loss, fear of time, fear of not being enough. So we spend our lives chasing safety, trying to gather enough people, accomplishments, stuff, anything that might keep the ground from shifting under us. But all of that movement is built on a hidden idea that we are incomplete, that we're not enough as we are. That wholeness is out there waiting to be earned, and so we keep reaching. More experiences, more praise, more validation. Even our longing becomes a project, a thing we try to optimize. But somehow, even after all that effort, the old ache still returns. That sense of lack, it never really goes away. Because we're playing the wrong game. We think we'll escape the loop by doing better, by achieving more. But the real way out isn't about improvement. It's about noticing what we're actually doing, seeing the engine behind the suffering. And the engine is the belief that we are a separate self, burdened with the task of completing a life story. That belief, that's the real weight. It's not the job. It's not the world. It's the idea of me as this tiny, limited entity who has to figure it all out. That's what keeps the tension alive. And the crazy thing is, this illusion of the separate self, it's smart. It doesn't always feel like fear. Sometimes it looks like growth, like ambition, like spiritual progress. We feel this need to get somewhere financially, emotionally, even spiritually. But the need itself starts from the wrong premise. It starts with the idea that we're broken, that we need to be fixed. So everything we chase becomes part of that repair job. And even when we succeed, even when we hit that goal, there's still that voice. Was it enough? We never stop to ask, wait, who's the one trying to arrive? And here's the key. This question isn't meant to be answered. You don't need to analyze it. You don't need to find the right words. All it's meant to do is shift the attention inward, to quietly reveal what's been asking all along. And in that tiny turn of awareness, the whole chase begins to dissolve. And when the chase quiets, even for a second, it's not like you're left in some cold emptiness. That's what we often fear, right? That if we stop striving, we'll just collapse into nothing. But what actually shows up is something familiar, strangely familiar, like it was always there, humming beneath all the trying. It doesn't shout, it doesn't sparkle, but it feels real in a way that no success or story ever quite managed to. It's not even a new thing. It's more like the thing you forgot. And suddenly, the endless search for something bigger, something outside yourself, it just doesn't make sense anymore. Now here's something wild about time. It only really exists when we're thinking about it. We talk about the past and the future like we're standing on this line, moving from one end to the other. But when you stop and look at how life actually feels, it's never a line. It's moments, little flashes, sounds, sights, a breath, a quick smile from someone, the feeling of warm water on your hands. These small things, so simple they don't come in order. They're not sequenced. They're just happening. But the mind, oh, it loves stories. So it strings all those flashes together into something linear. A beginning, a middle, a goal, an end. That's the illusion of continuity. But without that stitching, everything just is. A moment, then another. No past weighing down, no future pulling ahead. And you might hear this and think, okay, that sounds poetic, but it's still kind of abstract. But the truth is, it's not. It shows up all the time. Not in some dramatic enlightenment moment, but in the tiniest pauses. Like, imagine this. You're sitting at a red light. No music playing. No text coming in. Just you hands resting on the wheel cars moving past. And normally, the mind would jump in right away. Start replaying a conversation or planning how to explain something better next time. But every once in a while, something unusual happens. The commentary just stops. Not because you're trying to meditate or do anything special, but because there's just nothing to say. And in that tiny pocket of silence, you're not becoming anything. You're not performing or fixing or strategizing. You're just there, breathing, seeing, hearing, existing. It's not profound. It's not exciting. But it feels honest in a way the rest of life often doesn't. There's this quiet aliveness in it, not tied to your goals or achievements, not hooked into your identity, just raw being. And the beautiful part, you don't need to force this. You don't need to go looking for it. The only thing you need to stop doing is interrupting it. That's it. Because what you're looking for, it's not hiding. It's just quiet. And the moment you stop shouting over it, with your inner dialogue, your schedule, your mental checklists, it's right there, waiting. Or more accurately, not even waiting. Just being. Not concerned with your timeline or your progress. It doesn't age. It doesn't measure. It doesn't care whether you've succeeded or failed today. It doesn't keep a clipboard. It doesn't need you to prove anything. It just watches, softly, without judgment. And yeah, even with all of that, the longing still lingers sometimes. That ache. You know the one. It shows up like a small flutter under the ribs, a low murmur. We usually think of it as a problem, something to fix, or a flaw to overcome. But what if it's not? What if that ache isn't a sign that something's missing, but a reminder that nothing ever really was? Not a mistake, but a message, a whisper, saying, hey, remember. It points not to a future we haven't reached, but to something we forgot, something that was never outside of us, never lost, just hidden under layers of striving and identity and effort, not because we're sinners or failures or lacking in some cosmic way, just because we've been trying too hard, trying to become, trying to fix, trying to be someone. And that ache, it's not asking us to chase anymore. It's not saying do more, hurry up, fix this. It's simply asking us to stop, not give up, not collapse in defeat, but stop in recognition, to see that the peace we've been chasing, the one we've been conditioned to earn, isn't out there. It never was. It's not some grand prize at the end of a perfect life. It's what remains when the chase ends. It's the silence underneath the noise, the stillness beneath all the doing, the lightness that shows up not when we've accomplished everything, but when we realize we never had to, and the timing. It's not someday. It's not after you finish your checklist, or heal all your wounds, or find the perfect job, or relationship, or version of yourself. That moment we keep calling later. It's always now, always. And still, even when we catch glimpses of this peace, the mind tends to circle back. It wants to wrap it up, define it, own it. So what do I do with this now? How do I hold on to it? And just like that, we're back in the loop, trying to possess what can't be possessed. Trying to build a house out of something that was never meant to be held. It's not about holding. It's about noticing, over and over, gently, just like you'd notice a breeze. You don't need to bottle it up. You just feel it when it passes. And maybe even smile. The tricky part is we've been trained to measure everything. Our value, our time, our growth. It's all about metrics, goals, tangible progress. But that approach doesn't work here, because the thing we're trying to measure isn't a thing at all. It's not personal development. It's not a spiritual badge to unlock. It's more like remembering something basic, like remembering your breathing, or remembering where you are after being lost in thought. And that remembering, that simple shift, doesn't require effort. In fact, effort kind of gets in the way. This isn't a task, it's a soft landing. And here's the paradox. The more we try to force stillness, the further away it feels. It's like chasing sleep. The harder you try, the more awake you become. That's why this whole thing isn't about trying harder. It's about relaxing the grip, easing the tension, letting the moment be what it is without demanding that it prove anything. And that's difficult in a world like ours. We're taught that rest has to be earned, that stillness is laziness, that if you're not constantly improving, you're falling behind. So when we pause, even for a second, the guilt shows up. The itch to be productive kicks in. It feels like we're wasting time, but maybe that's the illusion. Because the truth is, those moments when we're just here, not striving, not achieving, not building those moments, are often the most alive, the most true, even if they don't come with fanfare, even if no one else sees them. That aliveness is subtle. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't sell well. But it's steady. It's patient. And it doesn't need you to be impressive. It just needs you to stop pretending you're not already enough. So maybe instead of asking, "What do I do with this moment?" we can ask something softer, like, "Can I let this moment be enough? Not forever. Just right now. Can I let this breath count? Can I be here without upgrading it?" And if the mind resists, and it probably will, if it says, "This is silly," or "You're not getting anywhere," that's okay. You don't have to argue. You don't have to win. Just smile a little. Let the thought pass by, like a cloud, because you're not your thoughts. You're the sky they move through. Now, of course, this doesn't mean we abandon our goals or our passions. It doesn't mean we stop caring or contributing. It just means we no longer confuse our worth with the outcome. We don't anchor our identity in the checklist. We can still dream, still build, still show up fully. But now we're doing it from a place that isn't trying to prove anything. That shift, while subtle, changes everything. It's like the difference between acting out of love versus acting out of fear. On the outside, the actions might look the same. But on the inside, one is heavy. The other is light. And that's the irony. When we stop grasping for lightness, it often finds us. Not because we earned it, but because we finally stop crowding it out. And in those quiet spaces, those moments in between all the doing, you might notice something strange. A kind of spaciousness, a soft clarity, like the mental fog has lifted just a little. And what's left isn't an idea or a concept. It's more like a presence, silent still, and somehow deeply familiar. You don't need to explain it. You don't even need to name it, but you can feel it, like you've been carrying something tight in your chest for years and didn't even know it. And now suddenly, it loosens. Just a little. That's not an accident. That's what happens when you stop running from yourself. When you stop performing your way through life and just show up as you are, not as the version you think people want, not as the story you've rehearsed, just as this right now, without the costume. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you realize this is enough. You are enough, even without the decorations, even without the resume, even without the approval. There's a calm that comes with that kind of realization. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for attention, but it sits with you like a quiet friend who's been waiting patiently all along. You don't owe it anything. You don't have to explain where you've been. You just sit down. You just rest. And here's the beautiful part. This resting, this quiet return to yourself, it doesn't mean the world stops. The bills still need to be paid. The groceries don't shop themselves. Deadlines, conversations, responsibilities, they all keep moving. But you don't have to move the same way through them anymore. Because now there's space. A different kind of space. Not the kind you carve out in a planner, but the kind that lives behind your thoughts. It's always been there. It's just that the noise was so loud you didn't notice. And in that space, everything begins to feel less urgent. Not because your life has changed, but because your relationship to it has. That tight gripping sensation that says, hurry, perform, become, starts to dissolve. And what replaces it isn't passivity, it's clarity. You start to see that most of the pressure was never coming from outside. It was coming from a script inside your head. A version of you that always needed to do more, be more, chase harder. But that version, it was never real. It was a character, a voice, a habit, a costume. And here's the twist. When you stop identifying with that character, the real you doesn't vanish. It actually begins to show. You're not left with emptiness. You're left with something cleaner, simpler, something that doesn't need decoration. It's presence. It's stillness. It's just being. And suddenly that feeling of being burned out, not from tasks or projects, but from playing yourself all the time, starts to ease up. Because you're not performing 24/7. You're not trying to impress the world or meet some invisible benchmark. You're just here, breathing, moving, responding, not from panic, but from something softer. And sure, the longing might still pop in, that ache in your chest, that question mark. It doesn't disappear. But now, instead of treating it like a problem, you might start to recognize it for what it is, a call home, a nudge, a reminder. It's not asking you to do more. It's asking you to remember. Not remember in the usual sense, not a fact, not a past event, but a kind of deeper remembering of what you are beneath the name, beneath the plans, beneath the identity. Because at the heart of it all, that's the thing we've forgotten. Not some spiritual theory, not some grand truth with a capital T. Just the simple, living reality that being doesn't require anything else. That peace isn't a prize at the end of a perfect life. It's the ground that's been holding you all along. And every time you stop chasing, even just for a second, you feel it again. And maybe with enough of those little pauses, the need to chase it all just fades. Not in a dramatic fireworks kind of way, but in a slow, natural, unremarkable way. Like water soaking into soil. Like something that finally makes sense. You're not trying to earn your place anymore. You're not trying to prove your worth. You're just living, not as a project, not as a persona, but as presence itself. And that doesn't mean life becomes perfect. It doesn't mean you never get anxious or annoyed or lost again. You will. Of course you will. But now, even when that happens, you know it's not all of you. It's just passing weather. A story playing for a bit. And you're the screen it plays on. The awareness that watches. The stillness that remains, no matter what. And here's the really quiet truth that almost no one says: you don't need to become anything. Because what you are doesn't need improvement. It doesn't need to arrive. It's already here. It's always been here. The peace you've been trying to earn, it's what's left when the trying stops. The clarity you've been waiting for. It's what shows up when the noise falls away. And that moment, this moment, it isn't later. It's not some distant prize you'll collect if you work hard enough. It's not hiding behind your next accomplishment. It's here, now, right where you are, with nothing missing. That's it. Not a trick, not a technique, just the quiet truth beneath all the noise. The one thing we forgot, but never really lost, because it was never somewhere else to begin with.